She had everything the camera could love: the lips, the walk, the wildness that couldn't be choreographed. But behind the myth of France's golden goddess, something was quietly breaking. While the world worshipped Brigitte Bardot as the ultimate symbol of freedom, she was drowning in a fame she never asked for. She was barely 20 when the paparazzi began sleeping outside her house. Every smile became property of the public, every rumor a headline. And in private, Bardot was unraveling, fragile, lost, and desperate for silence. Why would someone who seemed to have it all choose to walk away from it forever? What happens when the fantasy that made you famous becomes the cage that destroys you? Brigitte Anne-Marie Bardot was born on September 28, 1934, in Paris into a home of discipline and elegance. Her father, Louis Bardot, was a stern engineer. Her mother, Anne-Marie Moussel, ran their home with military precision. They expected perfection, proper posture, perfect manners, flawless performance. Bardot later said she grew up in a crystal box where one was not allowed to cry or complain. Behind the curtains of that Paris apartment, she learned early how to smile even when she didn't want to. She wanted to dance. At 10 years old, Bardot was accepted into the prestigious Conservatoire de Paris to study ballet under the legendary Boris Kniazev. Hours of daily practice gave her grace, but also a sense of escape. When the music played, she could forget herself. Dance, not cinema, was her dream. She once said, "I was never born for words, only for movement." But movement would take her places she never imagined. In 1949, a family friend convinced her mother to let Brigitte pose for a fashion shoot for Elle. She was just 15. The issue hit newsstands and sold out instantly. The cover, showing a teenage Bardot with unguarded charm, landed on the desk of a young assistant director named Roger Vadim. He was struck, not just by beauty, but by spirit. She had the innocence of a child and the sensuality of a woman, he would recall years later. Vadim arranged to meet her, and that meeting changed both their lives. He was worldly, confident, and 9 years older. Bardot was shy, unsure, still under her parents' strict supervision. But with him, she felt seen for the first time, not as a student, but as a woman. Her father forbade the relationship, so they met in secret. When Vadim threatened to move to Canada if he couldn't marry her, Bardot reportedly attempted suicide rather than lose him. Her parents finally relented. She was 18 when they married in December 1952. Vadim would become her mentor and the architect of her image. He saw the contradiction that defined her: fragile but fiery, angelic yet rebellious. And he used that to build a cinematic persona. Her early films like Crazy for Love 1952 and The Long Teeth 1953 were small comedies that barely hinted at what was coming. Then in 1956, Vadim directed And God Created Woman, a scandal that would burn Bardot's innocence forever. The film, shot in Saint-Tropez, was a revolution disguised as a love story. Bardot's character, Juliette Hardy, was sensual, impulsive, and free, a woman ruled by her desires rather than society's expectations. The story shocked conservative France and thrilled the world. The New York Times called her a natural wonder, while the Vatican condemned her. The film broke box office records and turned the sleepy fishing village of Saint-Tropez into a global symbol of desire. Bardot was no longer a rising actress, she was an international phenomenon. But with the success came something darker. Crowds followed her through airports. Photographers hid in trees outside her home. A simple walk on the beach became a battlefield of flashbulbs. Her privacy disintegrated overnight. When she tried to visit her parents, mobs surrounded their building. "They looked at me," she said, "not as a person, but as a thing." Vadim's creation had eclipsed her reality. Their marriage, already strained by fame and infidelity, crumbled. They divorced in 1957, but the image he created, BB, the modern Eve, would follow her forever. The studio system in France now built entire marketing campaigns around her figure, her pout, her hair. Bardot became a brand before that word existed, and yet she remained deeply insecure. Friends described her as both radiant and withdrawn. She'd charm a room one moment and retreat in tears the next. She confided that she hated interviews, hated gossip, hated pretending to be happy. Her journals from the late 1950s reveal a young woman tormented by contradictions, loved by millions, yet desperate to vanish. In 1959, she married actor Jacques Charrier after they met during filming. The press dubbed it the wedding of the decade. That same year, she starred in Babette Goes to War, proving her comic timing matched her sensual appeal. When she gave birth to her son Nicholas in 1960, newspapers celebrated the arrival of baby BB. But the joy didn't last. The public treated her pregnancy like entertainment. Paparazzi surrounded the clinic. One even disguised himself as a nurse to photograph her. Bardot felt suffocated. After giving birth, she fell into what was likely severe postpartum depression. In her memoir, she wrote with brutal honesty that she wasn't ready for motherhood, that she feared holding her child. The press twisted her words into scandal, painting her as cold and selfish. What they ignored was the breakdown happening behind the glamour. She returned to work quickly. La Vérité 1960, directed by Henri-Georges Clouzot, was both her finest performance and her most personal. Playing a woman accused of murder after a love affair gone wrong, Bardot poured her pain into the role. Critics hailed it as proof she was more than a sex symbol, but the emotional toll was immense. During filming, she was exhausted, fragile, and reportedly suicidal. Clouzot later said, "She gave everything too much maybe. The 1960s should have been her triumph. She was the highest paid actress in Europe. Her face on every magazine from Paris Match to Time. Designers copied her off-duty style striped tops, ballet flats, tousled hair. Women wanted to be her. Men wanted to possess her. But Bardot felt hollow. I had everything," she said, "and nothing." As the years rolled on, the price of fame grew heavier. Her relationships, Gunter Sachs, Sammy Frey, and others made headlines, each one dissected by tabloids. She moved constantly between lovers and films, trying to find meaning. Her work with Jean-Luc Godard in Contempt 1963 added depth to her career but mirrored her personal despair. The film's famous opening, Bardot lying nude, asking if her lover likes each part of her body, was both erotic and tragic. It captured what her life had become. A woman analyzed piece by piece until nothing was left of her soul. By the late 1960s, the feminist movement had changed public perception. The same sensuality that once symbolized liberation was now criticized as objectification. Younger stars emerged, and Bardot felt the ground shift. She was no longer the revolutionary, she was the relic. Yet she refused to compete. She'd already given too much. Then at just 39, she made a decision no one expected. She retired from acting. She walked away from the cameras, from contracts, from the image that had consumed her. The announcement stunned the press, but to Bardot, it was survival. "Fame is too much of a burden when you love freedom," she said, and so she left it all behind. But freedom, she discovered, was not peace. In the early 1970s, Bardot retreated to Saint-Tropez, the seaside town that had made her famous. The locals still saw her as a legend, but to Bardot, it was refuge. Her home, La Madrague, overlooked the Mediterranean sunlight on the water, seagulls circling the cliffs. It should have been paradise. Instead, it became her fortress. She would later admit that the silence of retirement was terrifying at first. For 20 years, her identity had been dictated by others, directors, journalists, lovers. Without them, she felt invisible. "I didn't know who I was anymore," she said in one interview. "I only knew who people thought I was." That realization became both her pain and her awakening. In 1973, she redirected her focus to something pure, her love for animals. For years, she had rescued stray dogs and cats, but now it became a mission. She began speaking out against fur fashion and bullfighting, often using her fame to shame politicians and designers. In the beginning, no one took her seriously. Newspapers mocked her as the weeping ex-star, but she didn't care. For the first time, Bardot was not performing. Her new cause, however, came at a cost. Her outspoken nature drew controversy, and her finances dwindled. By the late 1970s, she had given away much of her wealth to support shelters and campaigns. Her former studio colleagues couldn't understand why she would abandon luxury for muddy kennels. But Bardot had finally found something that didn't demand she smile. "Animals never betray," she said. "They never lie." In 1986, she founded the Brigitte Bardot Foundation for the Welfare and Protection of Animals. The organization grew rapidly, saving thousands of creatures and lobbying for humane laws across Europe. Yet her activism made her a target once again. She received hate mail, death threats, and constant scrutiny. For a woman who once symbolized pleasure, her new image as an angry, aging crusader confused the public. But to Bardot, the contradiction made sense. "My beauty served men," she said. "Now it serves life." Still, solitude shadowed her. Her relationships became brief, her trust scarce. By the time she married Bernard Dormal in 1992, Her fourth husband, she was living almost entirely out of the public eye. Friends described her as proud, but fragile, still haunted by fame's residue. She refused plastic surgery, saying, "I want to look my age. It is not my face that must stay young, but my heart." She lived simply cooking for her animals, writing letters, reading poetry. Visitors to La Madrague described a home filled with barking dogs, open doors, and fading photographs. One image of her at 20 hung near the window. Sometimes she'd look at it and laugh, sometimes cry. "That girl no longer exists," she once said softly, "but I take care of her still." As she aged, the public fascination never stopped. Every rare interview became a headline. In the 1990s and 2000s, Bardot's political comments stirred outrage, often overshadowing her humanitarian work. Her bluntness, sometimes controversial, sometimes misinterpreted, made her a polarizing figure. But even those who disagreed with her admitted she had lived her life on her own terms. The same fire that defied directors now defied decorum. Through it all, her foundation thrived. She helped end the slaughter of baby seals, banned certain animal tests, and influenced EU legislation. In 2018, at age 83, she wrote, "I am tired of men, but not of animals." The line went viral not as scandal, but as truth. She had finally outgrown her myth. In her later years, Bardot became a phantom of French culture. Tourists still gather outside her gate, whispering stories. Some claim to see her walking the beach at dusk, her dogs trailing behind. Whether true or not, the image fits the eternal muse now guarding her own silence. And yet, in that silence lies her victory. Bardot survived an industry that devoured its own. She refused to be another tragedy like Monroe or Mansfield. Instead, she reinvented herself not as a product, but as a protector. The woman who once embodied temptation now champions compassion. Her story isn't one of downfall, it's one of reclamation, but it's impossible not to feel the ache beneath it all. The loneliness of a woman who gave her youth to the lens and found no one waiting when the lights dimmed. The irony that her greatest act of rebellion was disappearing. "I don't belong to the world anymore," she once said, "and that is my freedom." Today, at her home in Saint-Tropez, she lives quietly with her animals, her memories, and her chosen solitude. She no longer attends public events. The once blinding spotlight has faded to the warm glow of a Mediterranean sunset. When she occasionally gives interviews, her words are sharp but wistful, filled with gratitude, defiance, and ghosts. "I have no regrets," she told Paris Match. "Only wounds that time has made peace with." And maybe that's the essence of Brigitte Bardot, a woman whose life was a paradox of beauty and suffering, rebellion and restraint, passion and pain. She remains, even now, a mirror for every generation that confuses fame with fulfillment. The legend of Bibi will always be irresistible, the carefree girl dancing barefoot in Saint-Tropez, the golden hair catching sunlight. But the woman behind that image is far more powerful. She faced the machinery of desire and somehow walked away, alive. Her story lingers because it feels universal. We still chase perfection, applause, the illusion of control. And Bardot reminds us how fragile those things are. The applause fades, the beauty fades, but the soul remains, waiting for silence. In the end, Brigitte Bardot did what few icons dare to do. She set herself free from her own legend. And maybe that's why, decades later, her shadow still moves us. If stories like this speak to you of beauty's burden and the courage to reclaim it, stay with us and subscribe for more untold journeys behind the faces that once defined our dreams.